History was made yesterday. A former president showed up in federal court to face criminal charges. He allegedly violated 31 counts under the Espionage Act and then allegedly committed 6 process crimes, including a conspiracy charge. And this is, of course, about former President Donald Trump, who appeared for court in Miami. And this was specifically about the classified documents case. And I need to make that clear since Trump has several cases coming out against him, including some very old alleged crimes, seemingly all at once and right during an election season. Kind of funny, right, that so many accusations are suddenly coming out all at the same time while Trump is campaigning for 2024. Now, we can talk more about that part going forward. But for now, I want to talk about the case of Trump's classified documents. Now, we won't get a more complete picture of what's happening until we hear from the defense. But for now, we can go about what's being said in the indictment and by lawyers who are poring over the accusations. So how's it looking? Well, it looks like the entire case is on very, very unstable ground, and let me explain. Epoch Times has a great analysis on this, and I'll just lay out some of the key points. First off, the entire case is built on a novel legal theory. It's never been done before, and because nobody ever used the justice system this way, well, they're making up the rules as they go along. But look, novel or not, the case is going to run into some really serious historical precedent on how similar cases were actually treated before, and they were treated differently, I'll tell you right now. The main charges around the Espionage Act, this is going back to 1917, in fact. The problem with this is that when it comes to classified documents, presidents and former presidents are not held to the Espionage Act. That was replaced in 1978 by the Presidential Records Act. And that act sets the rules. It stipulates how when a president leaves office, they hand over their official records to NARA. That's the National Archive and Records Administration. But the law also allows former presidents to keep personal documents. And that could include diaries, journals, personal notes, and so on. So what's the issue? It was determined in previous cases, including with former President Bill Clinton, in fact, and others as well, that the president is the one who gets to decide which documents qualify as personal and which ones should go to NARA. You get that? Trump mentioned this point himself during a speech last night to supporters in New Jersey.
Charging a former president of the United States under the Espionage Act of 1917 wasn't meant for this. An act for a crime so heinous that only the death penalty would do, and threatening me with 400 years in prison for possessing my own presidential papers, which just about every other president has done, is one of the most outrageous and vicious legal theories ever put forward in an American court of law, which is not even mentioned in this ridiculous 44-page indictment. Under the Presidential Records Act, which is civil, not criminal, I had every right to have these documents.
Now, even beyond that, there's a bigger issue at play. The Presidential Records Act establishes the laws on how presidential records should be handed over to NARA. And it turns out, as Trump mentioned, it's not even a criminal statute. There is actually no crime involved in not handing the records over. The worst thing a former president could face under any normal circumstances would be a civil lawsuit. Technically, the Presidential Records Act is the law that Trump is under. The whole idea that he did not hand over documents to NARA is based on this. But despite this fact, prosecutors are bypassing this altogether. Technically, what they're accusing Trump of is violating the Espionage Act for not following the Presidential Records Act. You get that? But look, let's imagine none of these facts matter. Let's just go with what Trump is being accused of, that he might have violated the Espionage Act for not following the Presidential Records Act. And, stick with me on this, right? Under the Espionage Act, there is no requirement that a former president should hand over classified documents. It's not in there. Not only was the act never designed to be used this way, but before the Presidential Records Act was formed in 1978, which again establishes the legal basis for everything we're seeing here, a president did not even have to hand anything over, let alone again a former president. The Espionage Act is from 1917. It does not include this law or this alleged violation. It's not part of it. You getting that? Under this law, it was not illegal for a former president to keep classified documents. They're accusing Trump of violating a different law, which would only include a civil lawsuit, but they're charging him with this one instead by using that one. Like, imagine, for example, it's like someone smoking a cigarette in a no-smoking zone. Normally, you could slap them maybe with a small violation. But imagine an officer arguing that since there was a fire involved in lighting that cigarette, they could instead charge him with arson. This is similar to how they're elevating a charge against Trump, using one crime and turning it into another crime in order to even make a case. In other words, it looks like they're pulling the old legal bait and switch. Now, it's issues like this that have much of the Republican Party rallying around Trump, interestingly. They're claiming that justice is being turned on its head for political reasons. Here's House Speaker Kevin McCarthy on this.
That has a number of classified documents sitting in a garage, but it goes back much further because he'd been here more than 40 years. And you've covered this a long time. So the idea that President Biden has been president, been vice president, but he was a senator. And to be able to get a document when you're a senator or a congressman that leaves a skiff, you got to hide that document. You literally have to steal that document. And to know that he has one of those, the idea of equal justice is not playing out here. And so that's a real concern to all Americans. So as a policymaker, elected officials, we want to make sure it's equal justice for all.
Okay, look, even then, even with all of this, they still need to prove criminal intent. They need to prove that Trump willfully kept national defense documents, and that's also going to be really difficult. But, well, this is where the process crimes come into play. You may have heard the saying that the process is the punishment. Here's the investigation itself, right? Here's where it was. It was used to create new crimes. The initial subpoena from the Justice Department, the Department of Justice going back to May of 2022, was accused of being overly broad. In fact, the overly broad nature of that search warrant, notably signed off by, well, let's not go into that just yet. In fact, the overly broad nature of that search warrant could help Trump's lawyers push back. But in order for that, well, Trump turned over all the documents with classified markings, and here we are now. Trump is accused of instructing a personal aide, Walt Nauta, to move boxes for his lawyers. Trump says this was him cooperating with the subpoena. Nauta then allegedly moved 64 boxes from the storage room where he kept documents and other items from his presidency and brought them to Trump's residence, also at Mar-a-Lago. It's alleged that Nauta moved 30 boxes back to that room shortly before a Trump lawyer searched the room for the documents. This is being framed as Trump trying to hide documents. And this is going to come down to intent. And what's the current record on intent? Well, Nauta claims his understanding was that Trump wanted to go through the boxes. Remember, Trump was asked to hand over documents with classification markings. He was not asked to hand over boxes that may, possibly include documents. The boxes were not the issue. Finding the documents with the markings was the issue, and searching the boxes could be framed as looking for those documents to hand over. And with the subpoena being as broad as it was, well, it made the task a lot more difficult, to the point that the subpoena itself could actually be problematic for the prosecutors. Now, Trump's intent could also be based on how he understood similar cases and how they were treated before. Trump knew that written law was in the Presidential Records Act, and so that was the reference point. And he knew that under that law, the one that he's being accused of violating but being charged with a different one, he could negotiate with NARA on which documents he could keep. And Trump also knew there was legal precedence for how former presidents, like many of the ones we mentioned here, like Bill Clinton and others, and on how the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, notably, handled their classified documents cases. Some of these also had legal cases around them, and Trump's knowledge of these will impact the legal case that needs to show his intent. Can they prove that Trump intended to keep classified military documents that he could not legally keep? Well, he may have looked at how others kept documents just like that as reference, and he likely saw they got off scot-free, that there is FBI records, notably, on allowing them to get off scot-free. Regardless, the Justice Department is sticking by its case. Amid the accusations, Attorney General Merrick Garland defended the integrity of the special counsel. Watch.
As I said when I appointed Mr. Smith, I did so because it underscores the Justice Department's commitment to both independence and accountability. Mr. Smith is a veteran career prosecutor. He has assembled a group of experienced and talented prosecutors and agents who share his commitment to integrity and the rule of law.
Now, back to the case, the process crimes could get thrown out if the underlying crimes don't hold up. This is the legal precedent, at least. The big question, though, is going to be on whether the DOJ is following legal precedents or whether it's choosing not to. There's other issues as well, such as the very real possibility that Trump's team could actually argue there was prosecutorial misconduct, and this will potentially tie into the fact that prosecutors got communications between Trump and his lawyers. Under normal circumstances, that would qualify as violating Trump's attorney-client privilege. In fact, a significant portion of the indictment is based on evidence that would normally qualify as attorney-client privilege. They don't seem to want to follow that. But for the rest, and to see how Trump's team chooses how to defend their case, well, we're going to have to just wait and see. Folks, stay tuned after the break. We're going to be speaking with Sebastian Gorka about the impact of the Trump indictment.